When we speak about God's plan, most people immediately begin to measure it against their own circumstances. If life feels stable, if goals are being reached, if the path seems smooth, then they conclude that God's plan is working. But the moment something unravels, when suffering intrudes or disappointment crushes expectations, doubt creeps in. They begin to wonder, does God really have a plan for me at all? That very question exposes how much we tend to anchor our confidence in what we see rather than in who God is. The truth is this: God's plan is not fragile. It does not rise or fall with your emotions, nor does it bend to the weight of your circumstances. His plan flows from His sovereignty. And sovereignty means absolute rule, absolute wisdom, absolute authority. Nothing escapes His knowledge, nothing surprises His will, nothing can resist His power. If your understanding of God's plan depends on whether life feels comfortable, then you have misunderstood both God and His purpose. His plan is not reactive, it is eternal. He is not scrambling to adjust to what happens in your life. He is the one who ordains every step, weaving together even the darkest nights into the tapestry of His design. Now, think about how we usually construct our plans. We plan based on limited knowledge, fragile resources, and uncertain futures. We make the best guesses we can, but we cannot control outcomes. We set goals for tomorrow, yet tomorrow itself is not promised. That is the limitation of human planning. It is built on shifting sand. But God's plan is not like that. He does not speculate. He decrees. He does not guess. He knows. He does not hope things will work out. He ensures they will. His plan does not depend on the stability of the world around you. It depends only on Him, and He cannot fail. There is deep psychological relief in this if you truly grasp it. Much of human anxiety stems from our desperate need to control outcomes. We are terrified of what we cannot manage. We want to predict, secure, and guarantee our futures. But this is an impossible burden for finite creatures to carry. No amount of control can stop the unexpected from entering your life. No amount of planning can keep suffering at bay forever. But when you realize that God has a plan anchored in His sovereignty, not in your circumstances, the pressure is lifted. You no longer need to bear the crushing weight of control. You can rest in the one who already holds tomorrow with the same certainty that He holds today. Philosophically, this also speaks to the problem of meaning. Without God, life becomes a chain of random events, a collection of accidents strung together without design. And if that is true, then suffering is meaningless, joy is fleeting, and death is the ultimate futility. But with God, life is not random. There is a design. Every detail, great or small, joyous or painful, fits into a plan larger than you can comprehend. That does not mean we will always see the reasons now. Often we will not. But the absence of understanding does not imply the absence of purpose. God's sovereignty guarantees that nothing in your life is wasted, not even the parts you wish you could erase. This is why Scripture can say with such boldness that all things work together for good to those who love God. Not some things, not the easy things. All things, even betrayal, even illness, even loss, even failure, these do not fall outside His plan. They are threads He weaves into a greater design, a design that ultimately displays His glory and refines your soul. The sovereignty of God does not remove the pain of life, but it redeems it. It tells you that even when you cannot see His hand, you can trust His heart. So let me press this truth further. If God's plan is sovereign, then the worst thing you can do is measure it by your present circumstances. What you see now is not the whole picture. You are standing too close to the canvas. From where you stand, the strokes may seem chaotic, even ugly, but step back far enough into eternity, and you will see a masterpiece. The plan of God is not confined to the few decades you spend on this earth. It stretches into forever, and forever will vindicate His wisdom. This should reshape how you live today. Instead of clinging anxiously to your own fragile plans, you are called to trust the one whose plan cannot fail. Instead of doubting His purpose when the path is hard, you are called to rest in His sovereignty even when you cannot see the way forward. Instead of measuring His faithfulness by temporary outcomes, you are called to anchor your hope in His eternal promises. The greatest tragedy is not that people suffer. The greatest tragedy is that they suffer without hope because they do not believe God is in control. But you, if you belong to Him, have no reason to despair. Your life is not random. Your story is not aimless. Your future is not uncertain. It rests in the sovereign hands of a God whose plan is great, eternal, and unshakable. The security of your life is not found in the stability of your circumstances, but in the sovereignty of your God. See, when we hear the words, God has a plan for you, most of us instinctively imagine a script that fulfills our desires. Dreams accomplished, goals realized, a path paved with comfort and recognition. But if we are honest, that vision is less about God's plan and more about our own. We imagine a divine stamp of approval placed on the ambitions we already cherish. Yet this is precisely where we must be corrected. God's plan is not the extension of our desires. It is the confrontation of them. His plan is not about affirming what we naturally crave. It is about transforming what we crave altogether. Think of the human heart for a moment. left to itself. It is bent inward, restless, and corrupt. Our desires are not naturally aligned with the truth of God. We are drawn toward comfort, power, reputation, and control. Even when we pursue what seems noble, there is often a hidden undercurrent of self-glory. This is why Scripture warns that the heart is deceitful above all things. And if that is true, then imagine the danger of assuming God's plan is simply to give us what our hearts already want. That would not be love, it would be abandonment. It would be leaving us enslaved to desires that destroy us. But God's plan is greater. His love does not indulge our distorted longings, it reshapes them. He does not hand us the shallow desires we cling to. He redirects us toward what is eternal, what is pure, what is truly good. And though this feels at first like loss, it is actually freedom. God's plan is not to satisfy the cravings of our flesh, but to liberate us from them, to set our affections on what brings life rather than death. This truth cuts deep into how we think about success. We are conditioned to measure success by comfort, achievement, wealth, or reputation. And so, if God's plan seems to steer us away from those, we assume something has gone wrong. But what if the very detours you despise are the mercies of God? What if He removes certain opportunities not to punish you, but to rescue you from desires that would enslave you? What if His no to your prayer is actually the greater yes to your transformation? Philosophically, this strikes at the foundation of human identity. Who defines the good life? If we are the authors of our own existence, then God becomes nothing more than a tool to help us achieve our vision. But if God is creator, if He is the source of all meaning and truth, then He alone defines the good life, and His plan will not revolve around indulging our dreams, but around conforming us to His will. Anything less would be idolatry, us making God in our image, rather than Him remaking us in His. There is also a profound psychological dimension here. When we pursue desires that are self-centered, the result is always emptiness. We achieve, we grasp, we consume, and yet it never satisfies. The joy fades, the hunger returns. That is why those who seem to have everything the world offers often live with the deepest despair. But when God redirects our desires toward Him, when His plan dismantles our idols, we discover a satisfaction that does not fade. We discover the peace of being aligned with truth rather than with illusion. This is not an easy process. Transformation never is. God's plan will often cut against the grain of what we think we want. It may mean walking away from opportunities that promise recognition but compromise integrity. It may mean embracing sacrifice where we long for ease. It may mean waiting when everything in us screams for immediate results. But in all of this, God is not withholding good from us. He is giving us something better than what we would have chosen. He is giving us Himself. And here is where the beauty lies. When God confronts and redefines our desires, He is not crushing us. He is saving us. He is rescuing us from the smallness of our own vision. He is lifting our eyes from the shallow pursuit of temporary gains to the eternal reality of His glory. He is shaping us into people who no longer ask, "How can God serve my plan?" but instead, "How can my life serve His?" That shift is the very heart of discipleship, and it is the evidence that we are being drawn into His great plan. So the question you must face is this: are you clinging to your own desires and calling them God's plan? Or are you willing to let Him confront those desires, even shatter them, so that He can replace them with something infinitely greater? Until you answer that, you will always be tempted to confuse your will with His. Understand this clearly. God's plan for you is not smaller than your dreams, it is greater. But it is greater precisely because it is not about you. It is about Him. And only when your desires are brought into alignment with His will, only when your heart is surrendered to His authority, will you discover the greatness of the plan He has prepared. The greatness of God's plan is not that it fulfills your desires, but that it transforms your desires until they are satisfied in Him alone. I see, when we begin to see that God's plan is not about indulging our desires, but transforming them, another truth follows naturally. His plan always unfolds in His timing, not ours. And here is where so many stumble. We live in a culture that prizes immediacy, instant results, instant gratification, instant recognition. We are conditioned to believe that delay is failure, that waiting is weakness, and that if something good does not happen quickly, it will not happen at all. But God's wisdom stands in sharp contrast. His timing is not arbitrary, it is perfect. His delays are not denials, but instruments of formation, shaping us into people who are prepared to receive what He has ordained. This is one of the hardest realities to embrace because it confronts our illusion of control. We like to think of ourselves as masters of our future, as if careful planning and relentless striving can bend the world to our will. But then comes the long silence, the unanswered prayer, door that refuses to open. In those moments, it feels as though God is absent. Yet often, it is precisely in the silence where He is most active, not working according to our timeline, but according to His eternal wisdom. Consider the way Scripture speaks of time. To us, a year feels long, a decade almost unbearable. But to God, 1,000 years are like a day. He is not rushed. because he is not bound by the limits that bind us. When he delays, it is not because he is indifferent. It is because he is accomplishing something deeper than we can see. His timing is not aimed at our comfort, but at our sanctification. It is not designed to keep us entertained, but to make us holy. Think for a moment about the psychological weight of waiting. Waiting strips us of illusions. It exposes our impatience, our fears, and our tendency to demand control. It reveals whether our trust in God is genuine or whether it evaporates the moment he does not perform on our schedule. In a very real sense, waiting becomes a mirror. It shows us who we truly are. And in that mirror, God is not mocking us, he is teaching us. He is cultivating endurance, humility, and dependence. Philosophically, the waiting of God dismantles the idol of immediacy. It forces us to confront the fact that our worth is not determined by how quickly we accomplish something, nor is our hope anchored in the speed of results. Our identity is grounded in God's eternal purposes, which cannot be rushed and cannot be hindered. The delay is not a pause in his plan. It is part of his plan. What looks like stillness from our perspective is, from his, the precise unfolding of his design. We must remember that God does not simply want to give us blessings. He wants to make us into people who can handle them rightly. If he were to hand us what we asked for in the moment we asked for it, it would often crush us rather than bless us. Think of a child demanding responsibilities he cannot yet bear. A good father says no, or not yet, not to withhold love, but to protect. In the same way, God withholds not to punish, but to prepare. He waits until the vessel is formed, until the character is shaped, until the heart is surrendered. Only then does he bring to completion what he began. And here is where trust becomes more than a word. It is easy to say we trust God when the path is clear, when prayers are answered swiftly, when life bends to our desires. But real trust is proven in the shadows, in the silence, in the seasons where nothing seems to move. Faith that cannot withstand delay is not faith, it is presumption. God calls us to the deeper trust that waits, not with clenched fists of frustration, but with open hands of surrender, believing that his timing is not late but exact. This does not mean passivity. Waiting on God is not idleness, it is active dependence. It means praying even when heaven seems silent. It means obeying even when the outcome is unseen. It means refusing to compromise or take shortcuts simply to satisfy our impatience. To wait on God is to live as though his promises are true, even when every visible circumstance suggests otherwise. That kind of waiting is not weakness. It is strength, because it declares that God is faithful even when we cannot trace his hand. So we must ask ourselves, do we truly believe that God's timing is better than ours? Do we see his delays as evidence of his wisdom or as proof of his absence? These questions cut deep, but they are necessary, because until we learn to trust his timing, we will never walk in the fullness of his plan. Understand this: the God who numbered the stars has also numbered your days. He knows not only where you are, but when you must arrive. His timing is not cruel, it is exact. And every delay, every silence, every long night of waiting is not wasted. It is the very tool he uses to refine you, to strengthen you, to draw you closer to himself. If the perfection of God's plan is revealed not only in what he does, but in when he chooses to do it. Trust his timing, and you will see that what felt like delay was always preparation for his greater design. If we have seen that God's plan is greater than our desires, that it unfolds in his timing, and that it is always purposeful even in delay, then we must now confront its ultimate aim. And here is the truth many try to avoid. God's plan is not ultimately about your comfort, but your conformity to Christ. It is not about making your life easier, but about making your soul holier. That is not an idea that flatters human pride, but it is one that liberates us from the tyranny of self. When people think about God's plan, they often imagine it as a pathway to a smoother life, better opportunities, favorable circumstances, relief from struggle. But if that is all his plan amounted to, then it would be no different than the ambitions of the world. What separates God's plan from human aspiration is that he is not primarily working to change your circumstances. He is working to change you. He is less concerned with whether you are comfortable and far more concerned with whether you are conformed to the image of his Son. That is the measure of his plan, the end to which all else is directed. Psychologically, this presses against our deepest instincts. We crave security, predictability, and comfort. But growth never comes from comfort. No one matures by indulging every impulse. No character is forged in ease. The human heart is shaped in struggle, refined in fire, tested in trial. And so when God allows difficulty, he is not neglecting you. He is disciplining you as a father disciplines his children. He is stripping away illusions, tearing down idols, pressing your soul into a shape it would never assume on its own. And though this process often feels like loss, it is in reality the highest form of gain. Philosophically, this reveals the futility of a life aimed merely at self-fulfillment. If the ultimate good is my comfort, then suffering is meaningless, even cruel. But if the ultimate good is my holiness, then suffering is not meaningless, it is necessary. It becomes the very arena in which God accomplishes his greatest work. That is why Scripture can speak of trials as joy, not because they are pleasant, but because they produce endurance, character, and hope. To resist this truth is to live perpetually disillusioned, always expecting God to serve our happiness. To embrace it is to find peace even in hardship, knowing that nothing is wasted in His design. Think also of the witness this creates. When the world sees Christians who are at peace only when life is smooth, it sees nothing remarkable. But when it sees believers who remain steadfast in suffering, who walk in joy even when stripped of earthly ease, it sees something supernatural. That is the evidence of God's plan, that He has not just altered circumstances, but transformed the soul. And it is that transformation more than any earthly success that glorifies Him. There is a temptation in all of us to bargain with God, to think, if I follow His plan. But that is not discipleship. That is idolatry dressed in religious clothing. The true disciple says, if I follow His plan, He will make me into who He wants. And that is infinitely better, because who He wants you to be is far greater than who you would choose to remain. And so the challenge before us is simple, though not easy. Will we embrace God's plan even when it dismantles our illusions of comfort? Will we submit to His shaping hand, even when it feels like fire? Will we trust that the chiseling of His discipline is not destruction but construction? These are not abstract questions, they are the daily crossroads of faith. Every disappointment, every hardship is an invitation to answer them. If God's plan is truly about conformity to Christ, then every aspect of your life, your successes, your failures, your joys, your griefs is woven into that purpose. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted, nothing is meaningless. Every detail is bent toward this one aim, that you would look less like the world and more like His Son. So do not despise the trials. Do not resent the waiting. Do not cling to the illusion that comfort is the measure of God's love. His love is far greater than that. It is a love that refuses to leave you as you are. It is a love that risks your comfort for the sake of your eternity. It is a love that insists you must be remade, because only in being remade will you truly live. God's plan is not to make you comfortable, but to make you Christ-like. And until you surrender to that reality, you will never see the greatness of His purpose. But if you embrace it, you will find that every moment, whether in joy or in sorrow, is carrying you toward the glory of being made new in Him.